English has been influenced by many languages, such as Old Nordic, French, and Anglo-Saxon, but none have had quite the same impact as Latin. Latin had its first major impact on English in 597 AD when Augustine widely spread Christianity in the islands of Britain, and a second during the European Renaissance. These new infusions of Latin to English helped shape the course of languages for centuries to come. However, it is necessary to show not only why and how these language infusions began, but also the context in which certain words developed. When Christianity was brought to Britain, it also brought new Latin words and caused great Latin influence on English. But in the first century, Britain had an almost completely pagan community, and it wasn't until Roman artisans and traders spread the word about Jesus and this new religion that a small percentage of the population converted. Christianity was initially not well accepted, but it was different from other cults at the time and required that they only followed the one true God, and followers could not dabble in other cults. As a result, Christians were persecuted and forced to worship in secret. In 313 AD, Constantine saw potential in Christianity as a force to unite nations and decided to tolerate it. By the 4th century, the population of Christians had increased, but pagans still dominated the island. The Anglo-Saxon and Jutes took over the island and established their respective kingdoms and gathered a reputation for being savage. Finally, in 597 AD, Augustine brought a mission to Britain. He landed in Kent, which fortunately already had a small Christian community, and the king there allowed them to spread their religion freely, and, inadvertently, Latin as well. These spread slowly and peacefully, with no martyrs. Augustine succeeded in converting much of the population and eventually went on to become Archbishop of Canterbury in 601 AD. Under his direction, cities underwent major changes. Churches and monasteries were built and used for education, not only of sacred literature and scripture, but also poetry, astronomy, and arithmetic. Language changed during this time as well. The Roman alphabet was adopted as well as many Latin words. There was a great boom in literature. Famous figures such as the poet Caedmon, historian Venerable Bede, and the scholar Alcuin of York became writers of some of the earliest Old English sources in the 7th and 8th centuries. Caedmon's hymn is now considered by many as the oldest surviving text of Old English. At this time, Old English and French were the primary languages. Latin was usually written, but was almost always studied as a second language. The Bible was in Latin, church services were in Latin, and people at monasteries and ministers all spoke Latin, so there was much to gain from learning Latin. When Latin was spoken at this time, it was primarily used as a language of debate in scholarly and ecclesiastical places. Text was usually read aloud at this time, and silent reading alone was not a common occurrence.